Your first project for the hybridity unit is called combinations, simply because in each of these projects you're combining two things, whether they be two different subjects or two different associations between subject and media, or what have you. The whole point of these is to create sort of a hybrid image. And a hybrid, if you don't know what that is when you breed two different species together to create kind of a better species or a better combination of the two. So that's kind of the whole goal here. Combinations of different things can be a really great exercise because it's a great way to stay creative and sort of make something new again, even though you're using old subjects or old ideas. Your first project for this combinations project group is called the opposites weave drawing. And essentially you're going to take two pictures and break them up with the grid, and hopefully they're the same proportions, or if not, obviously you can sort of scramble them however you want, but you're going to combine them into one drawing. And if that doesn't make sense, essentially what you're going to do is draw certain grid squares wherever you want them to be. You can do it in sort of a systematic way and do it like every other. You can pick and choose which grid squares you draw. It doesn't really matter how you do it. You can use any media that you want. You can use graphite, charcoal, colored pencils, doesn't matter. And then make sure your drawing is at least 12 by 18 in size. If you do that, it's easy enough to make the grid. If you don't remember how to make your grid, essentially print out your pictures, both 8.5 by 11, full page size. And then if you put a 1-inch grid over that on a 12 by 18 inch sheet of paper, your grid will be a 1.5-inch grid. And again, if you're having trouble with that, just ask me for help and I'll help you with that. You can, again, achieve the weave however you want. You can keep both of your subjects separate and just sort of draw squares as you go. You can cut them up into little squares and paste them in the arrangement you want them to be. You can mess with the grid dimensions. You can make your grid squares smaller for one subject and larger for the other. You have an awful lot of freedom with this. I don't necessarily how you weave together the two drawings. And in the examples that follow, there's all sorts of different examples. Some of them aren't even traditional grids. Some artists use like triangle grids. If you want to try that, you can do that. I'll show you how to do it. But essentially you're trying to create a hybrid image. You're trying to combine two different images into one using sort of little square shapes. Here's some student examples. Again, these are all in black and white. Doesn't matter if you do it in black and white or pencil. Obviously the association between the two images is being created on purpose. I believe the one on the left is like Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, I believe. And so they're trying to like combine those two. And then the ones on the right, I'm not quite sure. I think those are two sisters, and then like a cat and mouse, and that really, really tiny example on the far right. Doesn't matter what you use to combine. Look at a couple of these examples and just sort of get some ideas as to what you can do. Some of the artist examples here are going to be a little bit out there, but I include them just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do with your grid or how you can combine images, even though they don't really fit the project necessarily. I'm going to talk about the last artist, though, for a little bit, because he's a really good example of what I want you to accomplish with this assignment. John Boelee here makes some really, really cool stuff. These examples are fantastic. You should probably try this if you want to be super ambitious. And he's not just combining two images. I believe he's combining like, I don't know how many, but at least more than two. And he's being kind of crazy with how he represents each image. Like some of them are in black and white, some of them are in color, some of them are in a different color than what they should be. Some of them are in sort of like a blue cast or a pink cast, or they're a little bit darker or lighter than normal. He really plays with that a lot. So if you look at each individual square, it's like its own little world. Try that if you want. So he has a lot of great ideas in these images here. So don't feel restricted by two images and just little squares. You can really play with it if you want. So hopefully you feel inspired to do this project. If not, take a look at the next. Your next choice for this set of projects is the awareness of the paper drawing. I don't really know what else to name this project, but essentially what you're going to do is you're going to draw a person or a subject that acknowledges the fact that they're in a drawing, essentially. They have to acknowledge that they're made of pencil or charcoal, and they have to acknowledge that they're sitting on a piece of paper. A lot of the artists in these following examples here are artists that sort of draw their subjects as if they are aware of the fact that they're drawing. So they acknowledge the paper, like they touch it, or they smear themselves, or they kind of try to push out past that fourth wall of being in a drawing. I highly recommend for this project that you use a photographic reference and that you maybe create your own reference if you have an idea. You're going to come up with a lot of ideas as you look at some of these examples here. Some of these artists like to use self-portraits too, because essentially that's all they have available to them, and because that's sort of the comment they're trying to make, that as an artist they feel constrained by the paper, or want to acknowledge that they are making a self-portrait. So take a look at some of the examples. Consider your restraints for this project. I am going to force you to render this subject naturalistically, so realistically, and I'm going to force you to draw on a large sheet of 18 by 24 inch sheet of paper, but you're not required to fill that whole paper. Obviously, if your subject's going to acknowledge the paper, then you need to leave some of that paper blank. So I'm only going to really require that you cover about a quarter of the paper. Now, that being said, you should not shoot to fill in the minimum amount of space. Try to do more than that. And you can cut down your paper when you're all done if you have some empty space left over. If you look at these examples, though, you're going to get a good idea of kind of what I'm expecting, and just sort of play around with the idea of what it would mean to be stuck in a sheet of paper. Think about that as you're looking at some of these examples here. The first example, obviously, Cesar del Valle. He's really good. Kind of who I looked to first for this idea. He does these drawings on single sheets of paper, and sometimes I believe he does like installations where he draws a person like along a wall, and then he sort of does this sort of thing where he acknowledges that the person is made of graphite. So take a look at some of his examples and some of the other artists' examples for ideas as to what you can do, and then really think about how you're going to set up your drawing. Do you need a photographic reference of somebody doing something? Do you need to search for a certain kind of image? How do you need to pose your sitter? Really think about that if you're going to do this project right. Your last choice for this project group I just call a newspaper drawing, and essentially what you're going to do is you're going to draw on a sheet of newspaper or other found material. It can be any piece of printed material or a piece of ephemera, and essentially what you are doing when you draw on a sheet of newspaper is you're drawing on a sheet of ephemera. Ephemera is any kind of like discarded piece of print media or disposable piece of print media, something that's temporary, like a magazine or a booklet or a playbook, or just something like a wrapper. Every society or culture has had their own ephemera, whether it's like a ticket stub or a letter. You can learn a lot about the culture from their pieces of ephemera. It shows what commodities they're trading and buying. It shows what they are thinking at that current moment. And it shows what's disposable in a sense. So you're going to take that and you're going to react to that by drawing on it. I'm going to require that you make your subject representational. So whatever you choose to draw, whether it's a person or a thing or an animal, it doesn't matter what it is. A place, it could be a landscape. Try to make it representational and then try to react to what you're drawing on. So if it's a newspaper article about a factory explosion, and you draw the factory before it exploded. Obviously try to make it represent that factory. You don't have to be that controversial, though. You can pick like a page out of a book or something and sort of react to something on the page, or sort of make kind of a association between your image and the printed word there. There's lots of examples of what you can do in the following slides here. You're not limited by medium, and you're not limited by size. If you use a full sheet of newspaper, that's about 15 by 23 inches normally. But if you use, like, say, something a little smaller, or you happen to find a book page that you want to use, it has to match the complexity of some of the examples here. You have to keep it representational, obviously, and render it to the best of your abilities. If you need a photographic reference too, feel free to use that, and just sort of soak in these examples. I'm kind of excited to see what you guys do with this project. You have a lot of freedom with it, and it can be kind of challenging to draw on these surfaces, so I'm going to give you a lot of freedom with how you achieve this solution here. Sort of once you're done with the examples, and if you have an idea and you don't have access to the materials, please let me know, and I'll try to help facilitate whatever it is you need. If, say, for instance, you want to draw on a book or some kind of poster or something, I can kind of help you track that down if you need to. Otherwise, yeah, just soak in these examples. Really think about what you want to do. Again, quick explanation of ephemera. Something of no lasting significance. So, paper items, little discarded wrappers or sheets of paper that nobody really cares about. Sometimes they are collectible, like antiques or what have you. But any ephemera is fair game here. So, if you want to collect a bunch of wrappers together and draw or paint on those, you can. You can combine pieces. You can make a drawing on one piece. Again, there's no size restrictions and no real limitations on what ephemera you use, so make sure you talk to me about what you want to use or if you have trouble obtaining it. Yeah, and again, just soak in the examples. I'm excited to see what you guys do with this.